All right, so here we are in week 4, and this will be our final meeting for the month. And tonight's really going to be sort of a review and wrap up as you get ready to go into the final project for the course. And of course, there was no exploration for me to look at this month or this week, so no feedback there. I have gotten feedback to you on the week 3 update to the mood board project. And as far as announcements, also take a look at the professionalism assignment because there is a reflection video component to that. And other than that, I would just say to be brushing up on your Photoshop skills, review some of the activities that we've done earlier in the month with the Linda lessons and the practice activities from Photoshop, because you'll be putting those same skills into practice this time with the final synthesis activity. And it's called the synthesis activity because you are synthesizing or kind of bringing all these pieces together into one whole, applying the aesthetic principles to the technical Photoshop skills to make a combined composition. Is there anything on your mind, any questions or comments that I could address now?
Well, so it's pretty clear so far that it's like basically the final project will be a composite of um, of the mood boards that we already have prepared,
Yeah.
uh, and no copyrighted images. And we need to incorporate more than two images together and apply the typeface to it and showcase an ad, basically.
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up well, and I'm glad you mentioned the copyright issues, and I'll talk about it a little more. Actually, I have some slides later, but um, yes, and it is an advertisement or a poster or some kind of visualization, visual representation of your mission statement, kind of visual representation of your professional identity or your brand. And so what form that takes is kind of up to you. I pose it as an advertisement or a poster, but any kind of media that kind of showcases that. Those are the two that immediately come to mind as being relevant. But really, it just is a culmination of what we've covered throughout the month. As far as the last part of the mood board, which was the typography or the typefaces, it did occur to me that there's an area that I could probably speak more clearly about, and that is the the way I've been communicating the typefaces was as brand typefaces, and in comparison to, say, um, ones that might be used by a brand like Burger King. Um, and some of the comments that I've made were in regard to shareability. Um, but just to clarify, with the project that we're doing this week, it's the end product is going to be a graphic, and so all the typefaces are going to be pretty much set in stone. In the graphic, there's no they're not going to change. If you are using these typefaces in a document, say if you sent me your Pages document with your typefaces simply typed in and not as screenshots, there's a good chance that they won't display the same for me as they did for you, because I might not have them installed. And that's the risk with using more unusual typefaces for that kind of product. So if you are working instead of graphics with documents or a website, then shareability becomes an issue. So if I made that kind of comment as feedback, that's what I'm talking about. Um, for this particular project, that's not an issue. But if you are using this mood board to set your brand style as a style guide that will be used more and more down the road, because you will have chances to revisit this in future courses, then that's something to keep in mind. And okay, yeah. So on the Photoshop, the PSD file, the fonts are embedded as well. And also, if you use a PDF document, then they become pretty much hard coded. And more often than not, if you're going to share a document, it will be as a PDF, especially if it's, unless it's something that you're working on as a team. Like if you're sending a shared document to coworkers, then you might use a Word document or a Pages document or something like that. So that's when it would be a concern. And I think that's probably pretty well known, but I know there some of the class members who haven't had a lot of experience working in sort of an office or corporate environment and haven't worked with this kind of file formats might not be familiar with that. So just wanted to mention it. So in the future, in upcoming courses, like especially graphic design, because Jacob Kaplan, who teaches that course, and I communicate a lot on some of these topics, he will actually have you revisit your mood board, the work that you're doing this month, and carry this style forward. So it will become sort of your informal style guide for your brand. And you'll develop that even further with some materials. In that course, I think you make collateral materials like business cards and stationery and a logo design and that sort of thing. Um, so this will come back up again. And and he'll give you direction as far as how that will be used during that month. But I think there will be flexibility if you do want to change aspects of this at that point. But you'll have this to draw from. Also, the mood board itself is a brainstorming tool that you can make use of on your own at any point, and it will be used in the web design course in a less structured way. It'll be more of a way for you to plan it in a more free-form way. In this course, I had it very structured because I was, had certain goals that I wanted us to achieve. But in practice, a mood board is really anything you want it to become, any kind of ideas that you want to share. So if you see opportunities to use that, if you have visual design projects, either in school or in your professional work or your personal projects, then it's something that you might make use of. Did you have any questions as far as the mood board activities that we've done, particularly the typeface aspects? Okay. And the mood board assignment for week 3 focused on selecting typefaces and particularly with the emphasis on picking typefaces that were compatible with one another, that had a good contrast, but also compatible styles, so they weren't completely from different worlds. You want it to look like they belong together, but distinct enough to where they stand out, so you can see the titles versus the content. The other aspect of what we went over last week was visual hierarchy. And that is going to be important for your design project this week as well. And remember that visual hierarchy is simply your way of emphasizing certain elements or certain objects. So if you want the title to catch the eye first, and you make that larger, more brightly colored, more simply more colorful, or in some way highlighted, and highlighted in a very purposeful and intentional way. Um, or if you want a particular image to catch the eye first, then emphasize that. But really put deliberate thought and action into picking what you want emphasized, and take the steps that you need to take in order to make that emphasis happen. So make use of your complementary colors, versus your analogous colors. Make use of size, value contrast, and value contrast is lightness or darkness of objects, um, and really give your viewer a guided experience. So it's essentially telling them in subtle ways, in sort of subliminal ways, where to look in what order to take in your designs. So really quickly, and it looks like tonight's class will be relatively brief for you, since it is sort of a wrap up. The design draft. So what we've been doing over the course of these weeks is coming up with a design idea and then refining that design idea. As you said, it's a process of refinement. So you started off simply coming up with a concept. If you have this idea, this mission statement in this case, and this brand personality, how do you convey that in a visual sense? You have taking ideas and turning them into to visuals. And you start off by simply brainstorming, coming up with images and motifs and patterns, textures, design ideas that appeal to you, that you can see representing some of those ideas. And that's where you started. We picked out colors, and the brand colors will be incorporated in the form of logos or your text colors, or any kind of other design features that that show an identifiable color scheme. You could incorporate this into your imagery, but usually the images will take their natural color. And then you picked your typefaces that were of a style that matched the themes and the personalities. So the next step is to take all that and bring it together in this final design. This is what all this has been leading up to. So this is a good example. This is one of the students from last month, and she brought all the elements together in a pretty effective way. You can see, if we went back, and I showed this in week 1 as well, you can see some of the elements, the visual elements, actually making their way directly into the design. Also, if you notice the typefaces as well as the colors, so let's go back the other way. There are those same typefaces, as well as this sort of magenta or wine color and the deep blue also make an appearance. So this is just showing how those are all incorporated together, and in a creative way. Now, this particular student is a pretty skilled graphic artist as it is, so she does some pretty good work. And again, I'm not expecting artistry at this point, but I want you to try to incorporate as much of what we've covered this month in an effective manner. And notice the visual hierarchy, how the take, the leap, and especially take and leap are emphasized as the most dominant element. And then we go into some of these key core values and the imagery itself. So, and her idea was that the very natural weathered and aged wood and natural looking imagery builds in this sense of authenticity, and standing on the edge is symbolic of the fearlessness and so forth. So just as an example, I really liked how this one came out. So what I'm going to be looking for, and again, I'm not looking for anyone to be a graphic artist at this point, because certainly in this month alone, I haven't turned anybody into a graphic artist. Um, if you brought those skills with you, then certainly make use of them. What I am looking for is application of some visual storytelling ideas. Incorporation of those colors that you selected in some ways. As we saw in that last project, it was through the use of the text. If you want to try your hand at making a logo, you can. That's a little farther along than what we've reached so far, but not gonna hold you back if you want to make an attempt at that. Use your typefaces and show me a visual hierarchy. So give me a meaningful experience as I'm looking at your design. Photoshop techniques, and this is something that you mentioned earlier as far as what's required of the Photoshop techniques. And you mentioned incorporating 2 or more images, and you can, but you're not required to do a photo composite. The way I describe it is use the techniques that make sense for your project. If some of the techniques we've covered this month just aren't necessary in this context, then that's okay. You don't have to demonstrate everything. You don't have to do a color correction unless you need to do a color correction. You don't have to do a composite unless you need to do a composite. But I do want to see some Photoshop work. I want to see some photo alteration, whether it's cropping to change the focus and the emphasis of an image, combining an image, or just bringing in a new element of some kind, so adding in a traveling duck or whatever is relevant in your particular instance, or changing the colors to emphasize an element or to change the mood. And we did that back in week 2, and I saw really good examples of that in week 2 with the flowers that were altered so that one of them stood out, or taking away the color but leaving one brightly colored object in place. Things like that that really focus the attention, build that visual hierarchy. Or this was covered in the Linda lesson, but it wasn't part of one of the formal practice activities, but removing unwanted or distracting image elements. So taking away something from a photograph that you don't want there to distract. Is that pretty clear? Any questions on what is required or what I'm looking for? Okay, and I had a few examples I just was going to splash up on the screen really quickly. These are from previous months as well. This is a student who was focusing on, as it says, refuge for women. It was particularly on the issue of human trafficking, was something that she felt very strongly about. And so she had this brand title, Beauty from Ashes, along with the information here. And so the imagery, you can see this is a composite with the split screen. One thing I did suggest in the feedback on this one is that it be flipped so that the more traumatic side is on the left, transitioning to the more the healthier and more vital side, because of, if you remember from last week, the way our language goes from left to right, we're used to things moving from left to right as sort of the timeline. So it would show more of that move from the unhealthy to the healthy states. But pretty effective use of photocompositing. and includes the essential text elements. As far as text, that's the one common thing I do want to see, regardless of any other photo edits, is a title or logo or some identifier, along with a tagline or a slogan or some other bit of information. And this is the second piece, and he has his name directly on there, so using his own name as the brand name, which works in this case because this is about you and about your personal mission, and even included a little snippet from the mission statement itself with this very symbolic image. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what this is to entail. We have time now if we need it. Is there anything that you felt you needed clarification on, even as far as the Photoshop techniques? Anything that you're curious how to do that you didn't quite get from some of those tutorials?
Nope, all good.
Excellent. Okay. Well, this was again a bit of a brief course. If you're all set, then that's all I had prepared for you tonight. So if you feel like you're all set, I'm happy to let you go for the evening and get started on this project.
Will do. Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
You too. Thanks.